you, Jeff. So we've got some good time available until we wrap up for questions. I'm meant to interview the panel and put them through their paces, but I actually think what I might do is open up the floor first of all. Trust me, I've got some pre-prepared questions for our people here if you've got a little bit of, want to be a bit quiet for a while, but I really would encourage you to either direct a question at a specific person on the panel. I'm asked if you could please take the talking stick and use it because it will help us with the recording. So if you've got a question directly to a person on the panel, or if you think it might suit a particular group of our panellists, please ask. So who would like to be first? Thanks, Victoria.
My question is to you, Kelly, and it's a really easy one, I hope. To go full circle, how are you going to reward and recognise your team for all that they've achieved in your absence?
Really good question. I did actually do a bit of shopping in Europe, so I brought back some things with me. I think the most important way to reward is actually through recognition. So more than the reward, I find in our company that the little personal things about saying happy birthday to everybody through the year, recognising the individuals, and we have a weekly staff update. So as I was hearing feedback while I was away, I was still maintaining all of that communication with the team while I was away. But I think it's actually that personal recognition and actually understanding the personal, and it was brought up by some of the other panel members, it's those personal circumstances that impact the workplace, and actually working with your employees' personal lives and how that's impacting the workplace, and giving them the space. So we've actually got a few people working from home at the moment to give them a bit of flexibility to for everyone to pitch together, and that's, I think, been the really key thing that I've seen from my team while I've been away, is just the way they pulled together and they cared about each other. And that was the thing that I was probably the most proud of. And it's that thing of the ducks paddling like mad underwater, but it looks very graceful from the outside. So yeah, it's really about that. It's an individual recognition for us. And I did bring back different things for each person from my trip, which was really nice. So yeah, great question though.
Who's next? All right, well, I'm going to ask Deb one. Sorry to put you on the spot. The recent award, the 2018 ARI award for the organisation, would you mind telling us a bit about what you think contributed to that for the organisation?
That's a really interesting question, because I think in large part it's the obvious above-the-line things that contribute in an award like that. So there's lots of things we do in wellbeing, you know, that are obvious. You know, there's fruit bowls and there's massages and there's all sorts of things that happen during the year, but they're actually probably not the things that are important. It's all those personal touches that I think that some of the panel here have explained that are very hard to put into an award submission. So you need all those things, but you also need to have some really open and honest conversations with people about how they feel, the things that you can't measure. And I know numbers are important. I'm not disagreeing with what you were saying before, but there's actually an awful lot of things that you can't measure feeling. You can't put words sometimes around what you leave behind when you have a conversation with someone that's about trying to make them understand they need to be doing better at what they're doing. So prefacing that with, I know you can do better, and here's why I think that is really important. So it's all that kind of stuff. So to answer your question, I think the problem with awards is they look wonderful, and there's lots of things that, yes, you're doing, they're really important stuff, but the real work's sitting underneath that stuff.
Thank
you. David Hart from Dematec Automation. Similar to you, Jerry, we've got a team of engineers and technical people. So I'm interested in maybe some of the internal processes and things that you do internally. We find sometimes in our team, there's a lot of people who are just happy to get on with the work and maybe see some of this communication and HR as fluffy stuff. How do you strike that right balance?
Get my steps up today.
I think, David, it comes down to that everyone is different. And if you try and systematise it to the point that everyone gets the same thing, it's not going to mean anything to the people. You actually have to accept that everyone is different. What they want from you is different. What they want from the organisation is different. And the way you communicate, the way you provide information has to be different to suit different people's needs. And so we don't have a lot of processes around it. We have a lot of relationships around it. Very unengineering answer.
Hi, thank you, Victoria.
A question to those of you who have the working from home arrangements. How do you manage the risk to your business in terms of safety and responsibility for your employee that our existing legislation is taking us down a path of ridiculousness, nanny state, sort of, hold their hand at every turn and have a policy that they must make sure they've got their shoelaces done up, otherwise you're liable. How have you managed that risk to the business without ruining the culture of trust in your team?
Yeah, that's a really excellent question. Who'd like to tackle it first? Oh, we'll go down here and send it back. Thanks, Bruce.
Yeah, well, there's work cover. So, well, we've just been through a 6-month trial and it's been very successful and we're continuing it. So we've had up to 270 of our people off each day out of 800. Now, no, we have trusted in advance, paid in advance. We have set in place the guidelines and the parameters of what's required. The only thing we've asked is for them to provide a picture, but they need to, the individuals are ticking off that, I guess, basically like a checklist, that they've got appropriate ergonomic, chair, and they've got the appropriate facilities, that they're not, it's not in the middle of their 5-year-old or 3-year-old children. It's got to be a dedicated area, and if they don't have those requirements, they don't participate. So, but look, it's been incident-free and a wonderful success. We have not had, you'd be surprised, we get a lot of claims. We have not had one claim in that 6-month pilot. We actually think it has improved productivity. It's definitely lifted the morale. It's definitely made the employees a lot happier. And so yes, when people got the sniffles, they work from home now, and they're happier, we're happier, we're achieving more. And it also includes our call centre as well. So it's cost us quite a bit in technology to actually implement that, but it's working extremely well. Touch wood, no issues so far. But it's really done on trust. I think we will at some stage, we might have to just do some sort of spot audits to go in and just test a couple here and there. But so far we believe in paying in advance and empowering people, and we hire the right people first up, and delivers great results.
Thank you. Sure, absolutely.
Because I work from home quite a bit as well, and I find it super productive because you get all of the things done that you don't have time for when you're in the office every day. But there's been some interesting moves around culture. Silicon Valley and tech companies were early adopters of flexible work arrangements, and they're actually moving back to working in the office, which I find really interesting because, as I mentioned earlier, one of the challenges we have is when you've got people in multiple sites, it's much harder to maintain consistent culture. So I think I love working from home because I think it works really well for the employee, but I think that there has to be a balance of work time in the office, balance with some time from home. Otherwise, I think there's a connection that you lose, and that's a real cultural compromise that you can make.
I should have added 2 days a week they have to be in the office.
Okay.
Maximum 3 days.
Yep. Sorry, I'll come back to you, Annie. Did you? No? Okay. Annie, stick to yours.
I know I'm not on the panel, but it sort of ties some of these things together. We have a completely mobile business. We're national. We were mobile from the beginning, so we've never had offices. We've had real challenges with building culture. We've done it, but oh my God, we've made some mistakes along the way. People do work from home, but only after they've worked on client sites first. So we build that trust. They are productive, but it doesn't suit everybody. So it has driven great quality in people, but it's really forced us, when you have a team of people who are really disparate across the country, to work really hard on culture. And it's been such a baptism of fire, but I wouldn't go back to having an office in a million years. But it's, look, if it helps, it can be done. But I think you have to go down to the individual. So a couple of people spoke about, you have to get to know people, and they have to trust you to tell you what's going on in their lives, which I think is really hard, because I think culturally in this country, we've said to people, leave that stuff at home, don't bring it into work. But if you're going to deal with the whole, you have to embrace the whole, and that means some really unpleasant stuff. So domestic violence, arguments, dog dying, children in trouble, all of that sort of stuff, you have to take that stuff on board. So that's been our experience.
Yes, you make a really good point, because I think we were saying the whole person shows up, right? The whole person shows up to work, and as leaders we can't ignore that. So that brings something to mind for me, and I'm happy for any panellist to take this on, the whole issue of mental health in the workplace. I mean, we've seen that real rise of recognition about, you know, the whole person showing up, and who knows what they come with or what they're helping manage at home. And for us, you know, we're in an international business, and Jenny, you might warm to this thought. A lot of the executives and leaders that travel a lot, or they spend a lot of time overseas, you know, we're acutely aware that reintegration issue is often quite debilitating. I know personally when I travel, if I'm away from home for more than about 5 to 6 days, I definitely have some flat days, you know, usually while I'm away. So any of the panellists, where has the whole mental health piece crept in around culture? So I'll give it to you.
So I'm really keen to take this one, because I'll sit here. I'm a chronic depressive, was diagnosed when I was 16, have lived with it ever since. Talk about it, write about it, and actively involved in trying to say that this is something that it's not a preventative of someone actually being able to be successful at what they do. There has been a lot of stuff done in organisations everywhere to reduce the stigma, but the stigma does still exist. If someone walks into a place and says, I have chronic depression, I've attempted suicide, I've been in a psychiatric hospital, people can't help but judge them. And until we get to a point where someone can say that and say, but I've got help and I'm in a place where I can do this job, and they can move past that, then we're not in a place where we can actually deal with it and help them and accept them. It does come back to everyone is unique and everyone is different. And I have attempted suicide, and I have spent time in a psychiatric hospital. And I'm the CEO of a company, and I do a decent job of it most of the time. But it doesn't define me. It's something I live with, it's something I have to manage. But it doesn't define me, and it can't define someone else. So in our organisation, we've done a lot of work on saying it's okay to talk about it. In actual fact, talking about it is a sign of strength, not a sign of weakness. Getting to the point that people can talk about it means that you're a step closer to being able to do something about it. Now, no one in our organisation is a psychologist, no one is a psychiatrist, but everyone has had training as to how to have a conversation if someone needs help, and everyone knows the steps to take. And most of the time they end up coming and sitting down with me because I know what it's like.
Thank you, Jerry. Yeah, really important stuff. Any of Deb?
Thanks, Jerry. It's a really good conversation. A couple of things we've been doing lately is we've been running some programs that focus on positive mental health and resilience, dealing with grief, or a whole range of topics that are voluntary for staff to come along to. And I think they've had an impact around allowing people to start to have more of a conversation, and if they want to go, they can. If they don't, that's fine too. right from the CEO down, and making an effort for the exec team to just pop in, just to be there at times, is sending a message. All of those things we've talked about before, the importance of the leadership knowing what messages they're sending just from what they're doing. And we're finding that has had quite a significant impact within the organisation. And I think that somebody mentioned it before, bringing the whole person to work. I think there's a tendency in a lot of corporate organisations to kind of view the organisation and the people in it as part of a machine. And having this conversation breaks that down. It's really important to do so, because we're not cogs in machines. We bring everything, all of our baggage, all of our crap, all of our stuff comes with us when we walk into the office, whether we want it to or not, and we can be as positive and put on our uniform and our game face as much as we want to, but it pops up. And we need to know how to have the conversation to deal with it. Not counsel, but to recognise that something's going on.
Yeah, two things. One, that you're talking about employees not being cogs in wheels. I respect some people who've got titles of HR, but I've always had a problem with that term. I've always believed people, we are people, they are people. Let's call that team a people team, as opposed to human resource. I personally just have a problem with that. But secondly, in relation to the mental health, this is the second organisation I've been at now. We've put 100% of our employees through, of those who want to voluntary, but been very, very high take-ups of mental health first aid training, and it's just absolutely, totally reduced the stigma, totally opened up the whole, level of acceptance of the differences that we have, and just made it such a more beautiful workplace.
Just a question. We all work and live in a community, whether it be in Adelaide or a small country town. I'm wondering how you, I suppose, allocate your employees' times to either volunteer to local community services or things like that, and how you actually manage that amongst your team. Because we all know that it's easy to give money to certain charities, but to give time is often the most important or valuable thing. So I'll open it up to the floor if anyone would like to comment on how you manage that sort of thing in your teams or staff, and how that builds the culture, not only in the community but within your organisation. So. Pass it along then. There you go.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I'll be fairly honest here that this is something I'm struggling with. I mentioned what we did in Cambodia and Vietnam, and the energy that created amongst our partner group. And we have given everybody, they have a day where they can, just tell us when you want to go and do it. You can go and do it, a charity of your choice. But it's interesting, we've got a Grant Thornton Foundation, and we, partner with a couple of charities. And we actually almost struggle to get people to take that time to go and do it. So I don't have an answer, but I thought I'd just share with you, for all the good things we do and that we try and do and that we think we're doing, there are sometimes just some challenges. I haven't cracked that nut, so I'm actually interested in Deb's answer there.
I suppose also, how do you get employees to engage and get them to actually volunteer for things as well? So it's sort of twofold.
I'm not sure I've got the answer either. We started out, we've got an I Make a Difference Day, so as part of employee entitlements, along with all their normal leave entitlements, we have an extra day. And they can choose to use that in any way they wish, and it used to be targeted at charities, but now we've opened it up to allow people to go and work at the school canteen or to help out in the local library, something that's meaningful and connects to them, and we've had a lot more success with that. So the tendency to want to give to the charities is still there, so we run all sorts of, MasterChef competitions to raise money for whatever, but it's the local community stuff that's made much more of a difference, and we actually get much more uptake. Just a suggestion.
I just wanted to connect, because I'm not going to backtrack on what I said, which is probably quite important. But But we've got a fantastic example. We were talking about workplace flexibility earlier, and one of our managers has a wellness dog, and she's actually applied flexibility. So I think it's every Tuesday she works from home, but takes the afternoon off to go to hospitals or places with her dog. But one of the scary things about it, or different things about it, is we actually only found out that she did this by accident. And so I do think that there's a whole lot of people that are doing things, whether it's at the library, at school, or you know, wherever it might be, doing things. But they're not sharing some of those stories. And I'm just thinking back to Jenny's presentation earlier, where I think it was the founder, I couldn't remember his name now. Yeah, but just, you know, like to be in the background, we'll do all sorts of things, but, you know, people don't talk about that limelight, because...
Yeah, I agree. I think you're right. I think and I don't think I've got the answer either, but for me it comes down to, yeah, I think it's consulting internally and co-creating, and, you know, Deb gave that example of how it's evolved to, you know, a day that can be spent in a number of ways as opposed to just volunteer. I've made the comment to Cherie, who heads up our people and culture area, not human resources, yes, but our organisation purpose is to change, enable people to positively change their world, and we actually are measuring that. And we've got a goal to reach a certain number of people's worlds changed by 2040. So we've set the big, hairy, audacious goal. And we've got a very rudimentary ticker tape system. So we don't have the flashing billboard that has the number of lives changed. We've got pegs and numbers sitting up that my EA lovely put up on the wall. And we're, I think, 97,445. So I'm threatening the 975,000, I think. So I'm threatening the party when we get to 1 million, because then we've only got, I think, about 19 million lives left to change. But I made the comment, we're measuring lives changed in all the programs we run, right? Our finance team 6 months ago, who went through an awful lot of restructuring and just terrible stuff, we're through that, actually decided as part of their team re-engagement, they said, we want to go and volunteer for a day, an afternoon, I think it was, at Food Bank. And I said, sure, go, do it, you know. I need this team to get functional again. And they went and did it, and they loved it. And I made the comment, so there's 12 people in finance, I think. I said, we need to add 12 plus more to that ticker tape system, because it's our employees' lives who are changing as well, not just the people that are program participants. So it is that co-creation. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Exactly. And it comes back to what you said before, Jenny, which was, you know, I think it was the numbers you gave around how long it takes to change culture. It's a real slow process, but it starts with disclosure. It just starts with, you know, letting into what you do at. Yeah. What do I do on weekends? Why do I volunteer on boards? You know, being open about it.
Yeah, I suppose that's what I was just going to bring up, is that it's the visibility of what you're doing. So we're a small regional town and small business, very small business, but through the generations of my family, there's always been contribution within your industry, within your community, within the, you know, setting up, whether it's building the hospital in McLaren Vale or setting up the local, you know, cricket and football teams, that visibility has always been there and has stayed there, and so it's become a real cultural piece through our business because of visibility, I suppose.
That's right. Good. Yep.
I think it's also really important to understand the showing that vulnerability, particularly at the leadership level, because that's what gets conversations going. And, you know, I applaud Jerry for the vulnerability he's shown today to talk about that and look at the conversation that comes out of it. So that's just a small snippet of what can be done internally in your own organisation by having some of these conversations and showing from a leadership point of view vulnerability, and that'll really open up your employees and we found that with the one-on-ones, and we just talked about understanding stories. By the leaders or your leadership team sharing their stories, you'll get stories come back. And that's where you'll dig around and you'll find these little success stories or these stories that should be shared amongst the organisation, which again adds another layer in your culture. So I think we gain so much out of that in our one-on-ones, and I can encourage that. That's where you'll get those stories when you do hold those.
All right, we've got time for another question. Jeff, and do we have one at the back? Yep, okay.
So I just wondered, I think there's 3 people who've said their organisations have won awards. I just wondered whether there's a lot of work involved in entering for those awards, and do you really think it presents value for money, and if so, how?
Yeah, I think, significant value, and I think, one, it's about a tap on the back for the team. So everybody that, has contributed to the award, whatever the award is, I think it's just recognition for the team about where you've got to. But probably just as importantly, it's a mirror for the business, because typically when you're going for awards, obviously you're trying to benchmark yourself against, the best in class. And when you're doing that, you get a lot of feedback. So even if you win the award, I'm sure you'd sort of agree, you still get all that feedback where you bring that back into your business and say, okay, well, this is what our industry experts are telling us, this is what our peers are telling us, how can we, now bring that in and obviously, come back even harder. So I think it's one about the tap on the back, but then what you actually do with the information you get out of it is really important.
One of the things about our organisation is that even though we're in the finance and banking industry and we recruit from that industry, we don't pay what is generally paid in that industry. We couldn't. So one of the things that we have made a conscious effort around is not just culture for its own sake and mental health programs and all the wellbeing programs that we put in place and all the things we do, for their own sake and their own benefit, which is wonderful, but it's also about the recognition that comes from winning an award like that to attract people who otherwise would be attracted by the money. So if you're going to work in my industry, you go to Sydney and you go to Melbourne and you earn squillions. So if you want to work for an organisation that's doing all these other things, that's what we try and promote, and that's what the award's done for us. So in answer to your question, yeah, there's a lot of work to put in. I think there was a 22-page, effort to put it all together and put it in, and lots of work behind the scenes, but worth it, I think.
Yeah. I think one of the things, it's great to win awards, but you've got to be careful about how you use those awards. I think great to keep it internal. External, I think you can fall into a trap of being a peacock, and that's one thing that I can tell you in the super fund, we were very pleased to be 7 years running in best places to work in Australia, one of only 2, Google and ourselves, and that was